We do appreciate you being here. And we'll mention the prognosis for Brother Lester Camp sounds like it will be very good. So we're thankful for that, but it will be a lengthy period in which he's going through the treatment. So keep him in mind in your prayers. Also, Wyatt Blancheri and that he's going to be going through. They're on their way, traveling up north at this time. So be remembering both of those. Angels. As we have looked at this subject, now then I can't even get it to move. Andrew, if you will hit that once and maybe get it going there. The word itself, we've noted and needs to be emphasized, especially in the discussion that we are going to be entering in tonight. And I still can't get it to move. So Andrew might be having to do a lot of work tonight. It comes from the Hebrew word malach and the Greek word angelos. It very simply means messenger. As we have pointed out previously, it can speak of the literal angels that are heavenly, supernatural beings that are acting as God's messengers or servants. But it also can apply to simply man and his being a messenger for God. And as we look at the aspect that we are studying or began studying last Sunday evening and hope to conclude this evening, the angel of Jehovah, we'll see it's being applied to another one. But we have looked at several aspects of angels, their origin being they're created of God, by God, and thus under His authority. They have been mistaken for man because they take on man's appearance. And there are several attributes that we studied along with their activities. Then we looked at the different types of angels. They're just angels. There's then the cherubim and the seraphim and archangels, and looked at the work of each one of these. But then last week we began looking at the aspect of the angel of Jehovah. And the angel of Jehovah, the phrase is found 50 times in the New Testament. And my monitor just acting up. 50 times in the Old Testament, that is, and 9 times in the New Testament. So those are the number of times this phrase, angel of Jehovah, or angel of the Lord, as it's usually translated, is found in the Bible, total 59 times. Thus it is an important consideration for us. We began looking last week at the different times in which it is used, and want to pick up tonight with what we left off, and that is, well, that gives you the first time it was found in the Bible. As the Israelites are left Egypt, you remember Moses goes to Pharaoh, and after the 10 plagues come upon Pharaoh, Pharaoh complies with what Moses has said for God to let my people go. And so now then, as they leave Egypt, in Exodus the 13th chapter, in verses 21 and 22, it says that the Lord, and the word Lord there is Jehovah again, the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, to go by day and night. He took not away the pillar of the cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night from before the people. And so we are introduced in these two verses that here's Jehovah is going to lead the children of Israel as they are leaving Egyptian bondage. The next chapter, though, over in chapter 14 and verse 19, we find that the angel of God, which went before the camp of Israel, removed and went behind them, and the pillar of the cloud went before their face and stood behind them. So here's this. It says Jehovah is going to lead them in a pillar of a cloud by day, a pillar of fire by night. But now then, when we come to chapter 14, and this is, they have reached the Red Sea, and here comes the armies of Pharaoh, and this pillar of cloud goes back behind them to separate the Israelites from the Egyptian army. But it says now that it's the angel of God doing it. Whereas before in chapter 13 it had said Jehovah did it. So we start again learning who this angel is that we find within the Scriptures. Another passage we want to consider is Exodus the 23rd chapter in verse 20, when it says, "And behold, I send an angel before thee to keep thee in the way, and to bring thee into the place which I have prepared." Now, some individuals think that the angel that is being discussed here is Moses. That God is saying, I am sending Moses before you to keep you in the way, to bring you into the place that I prepared. But as you continue on in the context, Moses simply does not fit the context of the passage. Because as we go on, we see in verse 21, and I think I went too far, didn't I? I'm having trouble because my monitor is all messed up, and it's blinking on and off, so I only see it part of the time. Verse 21, the very next verse, where it says the angel is I'm sending the angel before thee. Now then in verse 21, it says, "Beware of him, and obey his voice, provoke him not, for he will not pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him." The idea of my name is in him is dealing with the very nature of God is in this angel, thus, that he is sending before them. But also we see in this verse that this angel has the power to forgive sins. Again, notice, beware of him and obey his voice, provoke him not, for he will not pardon your sins. In other words, he won't do it if you transgress him. If you follow him and obey his voice, then he will forgive your sins. And so this angel has that power to forgive sins. But we know that only God, only deity, is that one who can ultimately forgive sins. But yet here is this angel that is being spoken of as having that power to forgive sins. Also, it does not fit Moses because he would go before them and lead them into the promised land. Now, we all know that because of Moses' sin and striking the rock instead of speaking to the rock, or in addition to speaking to the rock in Exodus 20th chapter, that Moses was not allowed to enter into the promised land. He got them to the promised land, but then God takes him up in the mountain and he allows him to see the promised land, but he does not allow him to go into the promised land. But this angel that's going to lead them is going to take them into the promised land. Notice in verse 23, "For my angel shall go before thee, and shall bring thee in unto the Amorites, and the Hittites, and the Perizzites, and the Canaanites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, and I will cut them off." Well, that's the land that God has promised to give unto them. That's the land of Canaan. These nations, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Canaanites, the Hivites, the Jebusites, were those nations that were living in Canaan at the time. And now then, this angel is going to lead them into that land. Moses did not do that. And so it does not fit with Moses. But also, as Israel gets to this point, and before going into the land, or as they go into the land, the captain of the Lord's host appears to Joshua. Now you will recall, Joshua is that one who leads the children of Israel into the land. He took over the place of Moses and led them into and became the captain of the people and leading them and taking the land. Well, prior to going into the land, the captain of the Lord's host appears to Joshua. And this captain of the Lord's host has his sword drawn to lead them into the land. We come to Joshua the 5th chapter, verses 13 through verse 15. That it came to pass when Joshua was in Jericho that he lifted up his eyes and looked, and behold, there stood a man over against him with his sword drawn in his hand. And Joshua went unto him and said unto him, Art thou for us or for our adversaries? And he said, Nay, but as the captain of the host of Jehovah, or of the Lord, am I now come. And Joshua fell on his face to the earth and did worship, and said unto him, What saith my Lord unto his servant? And the captain of the Lord's host said unto Joshua, Loose thy shoe from off thy foot, for the place whereon thou standest is holy. And Joshua did so. Now you should notice two things should stand out to you as you read this. That is, the first thing is that Joshua fell on his face to the earth and did worship. If this is an angel, as we generally refer to them, then angels were not worthy of worship. And when you see in Revelation, for example, John falling down to worship the angel that is revealing these things to him, the angel refused such. But this captain of the host of God at this point does not refuse that worship. In fact, everything points to the fact that he accepted the worship. But then also, the second thing that should stand out to you is this at the end, where the captain of the Lord's host says to Joshua, Loose thy shoe from off thy foot, the place where thou standest is holy. That should immediately, within your mind, take you back to Exodus the 3rd chapter, where Moses sees a burning bush that is not consumed, and he turns to examine it and see what's going on. How can this fire be burning in the bush and the bush not be consumed? And as he approaches, he's told, take off your shoes. The place where you stand is holy ground. So now then we have this captain of the Lord's host basically saying exactly the same thing that Jehovah had told to Moses. Now then the captain of the Lord's host is saying this to Joshua, making a direct connection with what we see happening with Moses. And thus, he accepted worship, and he ties himself in with that took place. The fact that he would send an angel shows that this angel, or this captain of Jehovah, is also distinguished from Jehovah. The captain of this host of armies is being sent by Jehovah, but he is identifying himself as Jehovah. And that gives you a little bit more identification thus as to who this captain or this angel of Jehovah actually is. Another situation that we see is when the angel of Jehovah appears to Samson's parents, his parents being Manoah and his wife. This takes place in Judges chapter 13. And of course, Samson being one of the judges of Israel. But this angel of Jehovah appears to Samson's parents, and he tells them some things. He tells them that they are going to have a son. That son is going to be, of course, Samson. He gives them instructions for the wife of Manoah as she carries the son that they're going to have. Then he gives them instructions for them, both of them, as they raise the son, or when the son is born, and thus how to raise the son. But in chapter 13 of Judges, verse 21 and 22, it says, "But the angel of Jehovah, or of the Lord, did no more appear to Manoah and to his wife. Then Manoah knew that he was an angel of the Lord. And Manoah said unto his wife, We shall surely die, because we have seen God." They recognized, we have seen God. Who did they see? They saw the angel of Jehovah. But in seeing the angel of Jehovah, they recognized, we have seen God, and thus that angel of Jehovah is, and when they saw that one, they realized that is the same thing as seeing God, and no one can see God and live, they were thinking. And so we're going to die. Well, no, they weren't. But they did see the angel of Jehovah, and they recognized the deity of that angel of Jehovah. So let's make some conclusions in relationship to this phrase, the angel of Jehovah, who he is and what he is. First, the angel of Jehovah is identified with God. So he cannot be simply a created heavenly being as we generally refer to an angel. In fact, in the Hebrew, it uses the definite article. It is the angel of Jehovah, not simply an angel of Jehovah. A lot of times we don't use the definite article in that way, even though it indicates definitiveness. Here is something that is definite as opposed to something that is generic. Well, that's the way in which the definite article works. It is the angel of Jehovah, not an angel of Jehovah. And so there is an identity that is being given to this angel of Jehovah as opposed to angels. It is a specific angel that is being referenced. And I use angel there in a sense as we go through this of being a messenger. He is the messenger of Jehovah. But it's a specific one that's being referenced. The angel of Jehovah also possesses the characteristics that can only be ascribed to deity, to God. Remember, he can forgive sins, but only God can forgive sins. He had the characteristics of God. God was in him, his name. And again, Manoah. There again, you see, we saw the angel of Jehovah, we saw God. He identified this angel, or in Joshua's case, the captain of the host of the armies of God, identifies himself with that one who is Jehovah in Exodus the 3rd chapter. And taking off your feet, because the place where you stand is holy ground. This angel also accepted sacrifices and worship. Well, only God can accept such. Deity. Mentioned he forgives sins. His nature was that of deity. He had the characteristic and the authority of deity as well. Has that a type of authority that man does not possess, nor would an angel possess. Those to whom the angel of Jehovah appeared, they acknowledged him as Jehovah. They use, even though it says the angel of Jehovah, they also use that he is Jehovah. And we would also mention that the angel of Jehovah, as seen in the Scriptures, is distinguished from another one who is also designated as Jehovah. In other words, Jehovah sent the angel of Jehovah. So you have two beings that are under consideration. Or maybe we should say at least two beings that are under consideration. You have Jehovah, but you also have the angel of Jehovah. Jehovah sending the angel of Jehovah. So what we finally conclude in all of this is that the angel of Jehovah is to be identified with Jesus the Christ. It is a pre-incarnate appearance of the Christ, or the second person of the Godhead. And I hesitate to use the term Jesus because that's something that comes later on, as does Christ, or the Son of God. But it is the second person of the Godhead that we generally identify as Jesus the Christ, or sometimes the Logos, as we see in John 1 and verse 1. One and the same. We mentioned in regards to that this angel of Jehovah was leading Israel during the wilderness wanderings as well. But when we turn over to 1 Corinthians chapter 10, Paul in this is dealing with, here is Israel coming out of Egypt, and they're all baptized under Moses. And then he says that they did all eat that same spiritual meat, and did all drink that same spiritual drink, for they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. Now, we read just a few moments ago from Exodus 23rd chapter, in verses 20 and 21, that, behold, I send an angel before thee to keep thee in the way, to bring thee into the place that I have prepared. Beware of him, and obey his voice, provoke him not, for he will not pardon your transgressions, for my name is in him. Now, Paul is saying, here's this one that went before Israel, and that one that did so, and thus the Israelites ate that spiritual meat, they drank of that spiritual rock. And who was it? It was the Christ. That's who it was. That rock was Christ. But that one that was leading them, as we read through the Old Testament, is the angel of Jehovah. That Jehovah was sending that angel of Jehovah before them to lead them to that promised land. That's during that wilderness wanderings, the exact same time frame as what Paul is talking about. And Paul says it's Christ who is leading them, but it's the angel of Jehovah. Who's the angel of Jehovah thus? It has to be none other than the Christ. But also, and this kind of goes back to what we studied last week a little bit, and kind of need to remember that, but Abraham. In John the 8th chapter, Jesus is dealing with the Israelites, and they are challenging him, and he tells them, your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it, and was glad. Then said the Jews unto him, thou art not yet 50 years old, and hast thou seen Abraham? Jesus said unto them, verily, verily, I say unto you, before Abraham was, I am. Notice that short little phrase, though, that Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and saw it. How did he see it? To use the language of the King James. How did he see? And the it is italicized, actually, so it's not in the original. How did he see it? Well, he saw the angel of Jehovah. That's how he saw him. At the promise that God would bear, or God telling Sarah that she would bear a son, it was the angel of Jehovah that was declaring these things to her and to Abraham. And now then, Jesus is able to say, Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw. What did he see? He saw the angel of Jehovah. Who did Jesus say that he saw? He saw me. That's who he saw. And he rejoiced to see me. But he saw him. Also, he saw him when he prevented, and again, we said last week, the angel of Jehovah prevented Abraham from physically going ahead with the offering of Isaac upon the altar of sacrifice. The angel stayed his hand and then provided a ram for the offering. Well, who did he see? Well, Jesus says, he saw me. Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw. What did he see? He saw the angel of Jehovah. Who did he see? He saw the Christ. Thus, we have to conclude that the angel of Jehovah is the Christ. But also, consider this in the statement that Jesus makes, that Abraham rejoiced to see my day. He saw it, was glad. And the Jews' response, you're not even 50 years old. How can Abraham have seen you? Well, he saw that angel of Jehovah, and he saw Jesus. But then Jesus says to them, before Abraham was, I am. Now then, remember what God, Jehovah, said out of the burning bush to Moses? Moses says, God, who shall I tell Israel and Pharaoh and all of these individuals who sent me? And God says, tell them I am that I am. Remember the captain of Jehovah, the captain of the host, when he appears to then Joshua, and he says, I am. Again, you have that statement, I am that I am. And identifying him not only with what we see in relationship to the burning bush and Moses, but now then Jesus takes that same phraseology and says, I'm the one who is saying that. I'm that one who is the great I am. And thus he identifies himself as Jehovah. Is it thus any wonder that after he says this to them, the Israelites took up stones to stone him? Why? They recognized exactly who he was claiming to be. He's claiming to be God himself, the Jehovah that has been revealed throughout the Old Testament. That's who he is, who he's saying he is. And so they're going to stone him to death. So that angel of Jehovah is a pre-incarnate revelation of the second person of the Godhead. That's the only thing that we can conclude as a study of that phrase or that one, and the way in which angel thus is used in relationship to the angel of Jehovah is not as this created heavenly being of an angel, but instead as a messenger of Jehovah. He was bringing God's message to them. And thus, as the messenger of Jehovah, he was bringing the message that God wanted him to bring. Well, the study of angels, it's a fascinating study. And we've just kind of touched the hem of the garment. There's so much more that you could say. And this has been going on now for over a couple of months in our study of this, but I hope that you've enjoyed it and gained some knowledge about angels. I know I have in this, even though there is a lot more that could be said and could be gone over. But I want us to close with the thought that here are angels, and as we've studied about angels, we see that they're greater than man. That man was made a little lower than the angels, as the psalmist said in the 8th Psalm, and again repeated by the Hebrews writer. Yet, even though they are greater than man, they're not to be worshipped. In Colossians 2 and verse 18, Paul would say that let no man beguile you of your reward in a voluntary humility and worshiping of angels, intruding into those things which he hath not seen, vainly puffed up by his fleshly mind. Beguile you of your reward. How? In worshiping angels. How many times do we hear of individuals who basically worship angels even today? An angel appeared to me and told me, well, that is nothing more than angel worship. They're worshiping that angel that appeared to them, and they're going to do whatever that angel told them to do, whatever that is within their mind. that robs us of our reward. Instead, we are to worship God. In Revelation, the 19th chapter, and we mentioned this previously, in verse 10 of Revelation 19, it talks about John, that he fell at his feet to worship him. And this is an angel that is revealing these things to John. So I fell at his feet to worship him. And he said to me, See thou do it not. I am thy fellow servant, and of thy brethren that have the testimony of Jesus. Worship God. For the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. A few chapters later, in the 22nd chapter, in verses 8 and verse 9, he again emphasizes that I, John, saw these things and heard them. And when I heard, or had heard and seen, I fell down to worship before the feet of the angel which showed me these things. Then said he to me, See thou do it not. For I am thy fellow servant, and of thy brethren the prophets, and of them which keep the sayings of this book. Worship God. We have an obligation to worship God. And the angels that you see within the Scriptures always point to the fact, don't worship me, worship God. That's why when you see the angel of Jehovah, you know that it's God that is that angel of Jehovah. Because he accepts that worship, even as Jesus accepted worship while he was here upon this earth. Worship God. And so as important as angels are, we still need to go back to the point we worship God and not angels. Now, angels, it is the case that they had a free moral agency, even as man. They had the ability to choose as we have. Some of them chose evil. They left that first estate that they were in. And thus they are being kept in chains and darkness until the coming of Christ, and they're going to suffer eternal punishment. Why? Because they did not continue in obedience to God. Faithful angels did. We have the power of choice to choose to serve God, to choose to serve angels, or our vision of angels that some think that they have, or some man, or some group of men, or to forsake God altogether. We have that choice. As Joshua, after he had led the children of Israel into the land of Canaan, he calls the people together now that they have possessed the land, and he tells them to choose this day whom you will serve. They had the choice that they could make. He made the choice for he and his family when he says, As for me and my family, we will serve Jehovah. We need to make that choice as well, that within our life we will serve Jehovah. If you haven't made that choice, then make it this evening in obedience to the gospel of Jesus Christ so that you can be saved. If you have obeyed that gospel, become a Christian, but you haven't continued in that obedience to God, submitting yourself to His will, and yes, worshiping God and continuing that worship Him. And why not make things right within your life and accept the salvation that Jesus gives unto us if we will be obedient to His will. So if you need to come this evening, then why not do so as we stand and sing the invitation song?